And so what's great, Brandy, is everybody I have on these podcasts, they're always so nervous. They're always like, I've never done this before. Am I going to be okay? Am I going to do this right? So I don't think I have to worry about that with you. So we can go anywhere, talk about anything. So
can we just pick up on the conversation we started?
This is my friend Brandy Bell. I've known her for 24 years probably now.
That's crazy.
Isn't that crazy? So can I offend you at the very beginning? How old are you, Brandy?
I am 48 now.
You're only 48, so I met you 24 years ago. You were only about 24 when I met you.
So wait, I know I have to tell you something real quick. Okay, so there's a cute little marketing group I just have to tell you this quick story because this piece of advice actually may be really good for somebody. So you probably won't remember this because you've yelled at me a lot, but there was this really cute little young girl. She's probably 25, 26. She's a new marketing company, and they've started this organization for female entrepreneurs. And I was blessed to get to speak at the Women's Symposium again this year and teach, and it was fun. And she's out there in the hall, and I'm just chatting with her, and she's talking about some of the pushback she's getting. And she's like, people have said some pretty ugly things to me. And she said, I have a very strong personality, and some people just don't like me. I said, well, let me give you a piece of advice. So I said I was in the foyer of a church, and our old pastor, friend, mentor, and another gentleman who was a counselor, we were out there talking about something, and I said, do you know who Patrick is? And she was like, oh yeah, I know who he is. He came and spoke at Founders Blend. And I said, yeah. I said, he looked at me and said, let me make this clear. You have a very polarizing personality. People are going to either love you and be loyal to you to the death, or they're going to hate you. Mm-hmm. And you need to just be okay with it and move on. Just accept it. You be nice to them, but you got to move on. And she goes, yeah, okay. I told her, I said, I wrote it down. I wrote it down in a journal. And hearing that at such a young age, because I still think 25 is pretty young.
Yeah, it is. Hearing
that at such a young age was pivotal for me, because now when people just don't like me, I don't wonder why. Mm-hmm. I just say, I'm still going to be kind. And if it turns out I did something to offend him or I've done something wrong, well, let me know. I'm going to fix it. You don't have to love me, right, but I want to fix it. And so it was sweet watching the light bulb come on for her also, like, okay, I'm going to just keep doing the best I can, and it's okay if there are people that just don't like me.
Yeah, and I think you clarify there, because the problem you run into with young people when you give them that advice is they think you're giving them permission to be a jerk, which you're not.
No.
You're actually telling them in so many words, when you finally figure out who you are, I give you permission to be comfortable with not being liked. But that doesn't mean you don't like other people.
Yeah.
And that's and you don't try to do everything you can to help them, to serve them, to love them. But there's just going to be very few that in the end really like you.
Yeah.
And to go deeper than that, love you.
Yeah.
And maybe if I could go back in time, I'd tell even more young people, I think I did, but reminding them, the older you get, the smaller the circle gets.
Oh, no, you did. You've felt that.
You better get ready for that.
Yeah.
Because that's tough.
24, 12, 6, 3, just get
There's
smaller.
There's going to be one
smaller.
eventually.
Yeah. And that's usually your spouse, I hope.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then one other maybe outside of that you realize, that's it. That's it. And it's kind of hard to deal with sometimes, because if you've been in the public eye and you do what you do and done what I've done, you're surrounded by people who know you, right?
Yes.
And
they want to hug you afterwards.
Yeah, sure they do.
Because you're in their head and you're friends.
Sort of,
but
Yeah.
So we were in TJ Maxx, me and Marley, and I was pushing her in a cart, and I don't know what we were talking about, but this very lovely lady who I've never met before, I was talking, and she turned around and she grabbed my hand, and it surprised her, and she went, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I just, I listened to you on Instagram, and so in my head, I hear your voice, and we're friends.
Right.
You're my friend, and of course we had fun with it, but it even shocked her, like, she realized that
she touched you.
She'd never knew
She got into your intimate space, and she's never even been in your company.
Yeah. So and that's okay. And I don't mind it. I'm not going to say I'm great with it all the time, but I don't mind it. But no, you definitely taught about the circle thing. I think it's it's been, I think as you get older, knowing that too, it makes it easier when suddenly you're doing different things in life and you find out there are people not rooting for you that you would think would root for you.
Right.
They're not.
And some of them don't know how to root for you.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, I think it's fair to say some people just, you're living in a different sphere than they are. And also remember, the vast majority of people have stopped self-improving and growing at a fairly young age. I mean, there's not too many that at 48 or 56 say to themselves, you know what? I need to keep learning. I got to keep changing. I've got to keep adding to this. There's no arrival point. And many people, the vast majority, I mean, I think my research has shown probably 90% of people just go, you know what? I think this is about where I'm supposed to be. Or they think, I don't think there's any more for me to do. Number one, they're de-risking their life. So they found a place to sort of be. And so they just, it scares them to think, I'm this age and I should be changing. Yeah, like you should be constantly adjusting and constantly learning until you breathe your last.
Okay, don't sue me. You can't sue me just because you have the trademark. But let me just tell you. So on our discussion earlier before we started recording, the amazing lady I spoke with last night, when she was like, you have to tell me, like, what's your big goal? What's your big goal? You know? And I said, well, my why is I desperately want to encourage people, places, and things, you know, because I still love design, but to become all they're created to be. Now, I used to say all they're called, designed, and gifted to be, but
all you have to do is pay me your royalty.
I ain't paying you nothing. Somebody trademarked it. So all people, what are you created to be? Whether you're 60 or 80 or what, I mean, you're created to do something.
Right. But most people don't want to, you know, what you're created to be is moldable clay, becoming whatever is necessary for the moment and the time. And that changes. And people are not comfortable with that adjustment. And I say they're not comfortable with that adjustment. It gets even harder the more you watch social media and the edited perfection of everybody's lives and the short snippets of everybody's lives, and realizing that it's a long, slow journey. As Eugene Peterson used to say, I don't think he was the first one to say it, life is really a long, slow walk in one direction. And along the way, you pick up this and you pick up this and you go, this belongs in my life. This does not belong in my life. And then you may have to realize what's been in my life for so long doesn't belong in my life. And so I got to take that out of my life. And there's a lot of, you know, the root word for decision is to cut off. And so there's a lot of, you know, people don't want to cut off. They don't want to get rid of that or change this or change that. We're usually trying to find a place of comfort rather than a place of discomfort. And that's...
And we're supposed to constantly be in a place of discomfort.
I think we should.
That's how we grow.
We should. That's why we Sabbath, though. We rest.
Sure.
So then we can get ready for another season of discomfort.
Sure.
You know?
I tell the kids, grandkids now, but I used to tell my kids too, I don't care if it's hard. Hard makes us strong.
Yeah, absolutely.
So now even Marley, when she's having a hard time with her tennis shoes, she's getting mad. She's like, this is hard, Beebs. This is hard. I'm like, what do we say? You better say it. And she'd be like, hard makes us strong. I'm like, yes, it does.
It does.
I want you to do hard things forever.
So what are you doing?
Right now? Okay, so I do still secretly design because that's how I make money. And so mostly commercial. I'm very little residential anymore, just commercial, large commercial projects. And
like what kind? Like interior, exterior?
Yeah,
the
interior
whole
and
ball of wax?
exterior, the whole thing. Venues, I've done a couple churches, shopping centers, just commercial properties. I don't take really any new projects unless it's with people like Andy Bailey at Cornerstone. He kind of knows I'll always probably work with him. So I don't take a lot of that because we now grand kit a lot. Andy, we help Andy with his his kids, and so they are a big part of our world. And then we have the Keeping Good Company, which is our web series, which is just really our family trying to encourage people to go figure out what resources and time and talents you have to give to your community, because everybody has something. And so that's been fun, because it's even getting this younger generation thinking, what do I have? Or so we had, I love snail mail. So I put our P.O. box on everything. And I had a teacher, she was a retired teacher, and she sent a letter. And it just, I sat in the post office of Midland, Texas, bawling, and people were probably, what is wrong with that lady? Because it was the first thing I got that said we were on the right track. And it was this retired teacher, and she said, hey, I love following you. My husband got me a really expensive embroidery machine as a gift for retirement. Can you send me some ideas of how I can use it for my community? And that's it. That's the message of the show. We all have something to give, whether you're good in communication, maybe you have money, maybe you don't, maybe you have some time to volunteer, maybe you like to bake. We all have something. And if it weren't for people sacrificing, me and my little family wouldn't even be here, right? And so we love that. We love doing that. The show's great. I have, I'm speaking with a literary agent. I mentioned that about my new book. So working on that.
Yeah.
That's always scary, because it's putting part of yourself out there. And this is
Right.
a framework that I've worked on for almost 15 years, thoroughly for 10. And so you were like, you were saying like, well, there's nothing new, so-and-so said this, but I start with, there's nothing new under the sun.
Right.
So says Socrates, so says King Solomon. It is just a collection of works from people way smarter than me. And I've taken the bits and pieces over a very long journey and said, this is how I want to create my values-based framework. And how can I make it easy enough that other working moms, stay-at-home moms, retired moms, grandmas can look at it and go, I do want something different in my life, but it's freaking hard and I don't know where to start.
Right.
And so this is probably my, maybe my magnum opus, if we don't consider my kids my magnum opus.
Right.
And so I think it's good, and I'm passionate about it.
Right. So when you say there's nothing new in the sun, my favorite quote is Mark Twain, who said, the only person who had an original idea was Adam. And you're like, yeah, that's exactly right. So let's keep just building on what other people have established. Do you have a title yet?
Yes. So it's just traveling through why I'm not afraid of potholes and hitchhikers. And so it's a storytelling concept, because I believe we change through stories. I do. And so there's a framework to work through, and there's best life practices and exercises and there's all that, but there's also stories. And so, the stories are usually potholes. I've been in a lot of potholes, Patrick, Peyton, a lot. And I've even picked up some hitchhikers along the way. And I wouldn't change any of it.
Right.
I wouldn't. And it's Andy Stanley, it's Simon Sinek, it's Brene Brown, it's Dale Carnegie, it's Stephen Covey, it's John Maxwell. It's every thought leader that has shaped me in some way. And by the way, that's a half a dozen of probably 40 or 50. Like the citations in the back are insane.
Yeah.
Just because there's some of you, it's just people I've learned from. And I tell the women when they come to our little workshops that you have a voice for someone. Okay. Yeah. Not everybody's going to relate to my story. Not everyone's going to learn from me, but there's a few people. And so me telling my story, my way, will help someone. There's somebody else out there telling a different story, but probably with the same info.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because there's nothing new under the sun.
Right.
But
the stories all have the same content. They just there's a different life to each story.
Yeah.
Every story has a challenge. Every story has a villain. Every story has a hero.
It's the hero's journey.
And I want to, a couple of thoughts have run through my mind. Let me go back to snail mail.
Okay.
I have a practice where I write my grandkids a letter a quarter. And so it's on my little letterhead cards, and I write them and say whatever,
Sure.
related to, so they have a collection when they get older of, this is granddad. My granddad name is Boomer. So these are things Boomer wrote for me. So when I'm gone, they can be like, these are my Boomer's
I'm
letters.
going to steal that.
But I think there's that missing element of, you said it. I mean, I love going to the mailbox and getting a letter. I spoke at an event the other day. There's a school here called Midland Classical. And once a year, this precious couple who has this class, it's a leadership class of juniors. And they've asked me to come in and speak about leadership every year. And the couple, you can tell she's made them do this, but it's still wonderful. About 2 weeks after I finish speaking, my mailbox will be filled with, I think there's 30 some odd kids in the class, and there'll be 30 thank you cards that have been handwritten.
That's cool.
And I read them all because I'd never want to run into one of them and say, did you get my card? And me have to be like, yeah, I got it. But I knew what it said. So I open every one of them, read every one of them, and then you can begin to tell which ones are following the pattern she asked them to write. Like, she probably showed them some ways to write a thank you card, and you can tell some of them wrote it the way they were told to write it. And then there's probably 5 or 6 where you can tell they took notes and they listened, and so they'll actually write. But it's the tactile.
Sure.
I've got the card.
Well, our brain was created that way.
Totally. And I've done this for 25 years. I keep boxes of all positive letters and emails that are positive.
Okay, I do too. But not because you had told me that in the past. I didn't know you did that. I do that.
My brother-in-law told me that 26 years ago. He said, hey, let me give you a little bit of advice. You need to keep a positive box because the negative box will always be more full than the positive box. And you're going to need to be able to go back and find those letters where somebody said, hey, thank you for doing this. Thank you for doing that. And, there's just something about writing the letter. Even if it's typed, I don't care if it's typed. At least you took the time
to do it.
Because
Sure.
there's a good chance you might have typed because your handwriting's so bad.
Yeah.
And you and I know the guy, Carol Thomas.
Yes.
I don't know if you've ever seen that man's handwriting.
No, is it
It's
atrocious?
exquisite.
Oh.
It is exquisite. It is cursive, which I don't know if anybody still knows what that is.
They only teach it now at Midland Classical in Midland, is from what
Yeah,
I understand.
I don't know anybody who writes in cursive other than my in-laws and my mother.
I do.
And his handwriting is just, you just want to look at it.
It's going to be a lost art that will come back at some point. So
It
I'm just
probably will.
claiming it now. At some point, they're going to bring it back.
Yeah, you could probably do a video series on how to write in cursive, and people would think, well, I've never even known that. So
I keep my thank you cards each year. I don't show people. It's not like, hey, this is my wall of thank yous. Like nobody knows it. There's it's just like a little alligator clip thingy in my office because my goal every year is a super weird goal, but it is. At the end of the year, I want to have 12 at least. Now I'm not going to say how many I have because then that sounds braggadocious, but my goal is to have one for each month.
Yep.
And then the reason why is not just for the positive feedback, but it's a simple way to go, am I doing good? And by the way, I don't keep ones for like baby shower gifts and wedding gifts. It has to be like
almost an out of the blue. Wow, surprise.
Yeah, like, hey, thank you. Or the Women's Symposium sent me a letter, little card, and that was sweet. And so I put that up because it's, am I being intentional? So there's a definition for the word intentional.
I hope so.
Intentionalism.
Okay.
It's not a good one.
No.
I don't even think
It's
they
a
did
very
a good
church
job.
word. Let's be intentional about this.
So I stole the word intentionalism and I've given it a totally different definition because I want to be intentional with, am I trying to put good in the world? Because I'm a bit of a fighter, and I don't want to be all the time. Right? There's a time and a place. And so I have to make it a goal every year to make sure I'm being intentional with kindness. You don't have to feel kind to be kind. Kindness is an action. You can feel kind, but rarely do we, I think. And so, am I being kind in the ways that would encourage someone to send me a thank you card?
So that's your definition of intentionality, choosing right actions.
Not necessarily. So intentionalism, my definition of intentionalism is choosing to be intentional in every area of your life.
But when I was in third grade, I was told you can't use the word in the definition.
Well, okay, so, all right, fair enough. So intentionalism, then, in that case, is being very specific and objective-minded, having an objective in mind, because I know you don't love the word goals. Is that true?
Yeah, I've fallen out of love with it over the years.
Okay, so
I'm falling out of love with more and more words because they get captured by culture. But anyways,
sure,
go ahead.
everything it's not fair. Everything gets captured by culture.
But you have to be ahead of it.
So when I do workshops with women now, I say, okay, for the third part of the framework that I created, here is your time to set your goal, your objective, or your intention. It's the only one
What's
I have
the difference
three on.
between a goal and an objective?
I'm not sure there's a big difference, except goals are a little bit easier to, you don't always have to have measurements for objectives. You can, but I feel like objectives can sometimes be a little bit more vague. Goals normally have a set of measurements, like so that you know when you achieved it. And intentions also, when you set an intention for something, so intentionalism to me is not the Webster definition. It's setting the intention of doing things with a specific purpose so that they somehow feed you heart, soul, mind, or body. So, the thing I talked about with the women was we all have a cap on our energy. Now, some of us have more energy than others. Right. We do. I'm a teapot, right? There's a whole lot coming out of me. But teacups are beautiful too. They're good. We all have different capacities.
That was such a women's event analogy.
It was. I know. Well, I hang out with women a lot, so there you go. So we have. So science.
But I'm a little surprised at that. I would actually, because you're not like a
normal woman.
A lady.
Yes.
So I'm really surprised you have the teapot thing. Like, I'm thinking you would be more like a still.
Yes.
Yes. Or a brewery or something.
Yeah. No, that's pretty accurate too. I mean, they're both accurate. I do have tea every afternoon at 4:00. You know why? Because I set that intention in 2019 when I turned my notifications off on my phone, which they've been off since. And I have an alarm that goes off on my phone, but it just vibrates and it says pause. Okay. And so I love hot tea. I mean, I'm from Virginia. We were established by England. So I love hot tea.
It's a bit of a stretch, but that's okay.
I'm going to kick your butt. Okay, so wait, back to the energy, right? So we all have limited energy, but scientists, I mean, I have so much research on this, have proven that we either give or receive energy through our mind, our body, our heart, and soul. Like it's like they're acknowledging that there is a difference between the heart and the soul, which is to me amazing in 2023. And you can go to the journal Neuron, the journal Cell, any of those. But so we have those four parts: heart, soul, mind, and body. So we have mental health, physical health, emotional health, and spiritual health. Right. And if you happen to share my faith base, which most of our friends these days have a different background, which is amazing because, but we're told to love the Lord God with all our heart, soul, mind, and body. Right. Nothing new under the sun. Well, what women tend to do is we tend to use our energy and our capacity towards those things that we have an emotional relationship, our people, and our places and our things. So whatever that emotion is. So research so far, and granted, there's always a little bit of looseness with research, but the research that I've found thus far shows that women use 70% of their energy on their emotional relationships. And so what? We got 30% now left for spiritual, mental, and physical. And so when I ask for a raise of hands, a show of hands that says, hey, if you would say that you give really good energy and attention to your physical health, raise your hand. There's maybe 3 or 4 out of 100.
Right.
What? And so same thing with spiritual, same thing with mental. And so one of the things with intentionalism, I believe, is going, okay, I'm going to sit down and have a big old honking binder like you do. I'm going to sit down and plan, how am I going to check that I am giving the proper amount of time to each part of my body? Because there's 4 very distinct parts to one human being, right? And so how am I going to give attention to my spiritual life, my physical life, my mental life, and my emotional? And so just going through a series of questions like, am I doing this? Am I doing that? It's not complicated when you choose to set the goal or intention or objective.
Or the habit.
Well, see, I believe habits come after goals. In the framework, the way I laid it out.
I think it's all a part of the same makeup. It's not separate categories. And it's you, how many of them do you think actually understand? You've quoted Covey a couple of times. Because what changed my goals was an understanding of my roles.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And most people don't establish the roles they're playing. So they're playing in the wrong game.
Sure. So we include that for sure.
Yeah. So
and
like,
I use F words.
My Christian is a role. I'm a Christian in any place, follower of Jesus. I'm a father, husband, uncle, father-in-law, son-in-law, granddad. So these are roles I play.
Sure.
And I'm a competitor. It's a role I choose to play. Instigator and agitator is another role I choose to play.
Sometimes sarcastic.
They are, and I have to own that. So I don't even have them numbered. I'm thinking as I look at the list, there's probably 9 roles that I have established in my life. And so if you take the values propositions I have, which are 13, which are my governing constitution, and then you take my roles, then what that does is it then establishes what will I pursue in those roles. So many people get caught up in goals because they have they go, and I'm not debating the word goal, objective, or whatever at this point. They just, I think I want to do that, but they don't know why they want to do that because they don't know the roles they're playing in life. And
absolutely.
When you establish the roles, you know, okay, that's the game I'm going to play. I'm not playing that game. I'm not going to play that game. And when people ask you to do things, you have a filter now. You go, okay, does that fit in a role that I'm supposed to be? And so it's just again, it's nothing really new, but you go back to Covey and it's...
Well, it starts with why, says Simon Sinek. So the way I do it, because, I like to... I don't want to say I'm simple-minded, but I like simple processes. I think when we keep processes simple, we're able to live in them more fully because you're not thinking about them so much. Right. So your values are your why. It starts with why. You would be surprised when you sit down with a group of women and say, hey, I'm going to give you 3 minutes, write out your values.
They're going to sit there for 3 minutes.
Very few of them know what they value. And I'm like, how can you know what direction you want to go in life when you don't even know what's important to you? Right. So we start with values. Values are your why. Right. Then based on our why, so for example, I value health. Okay, very vague. It's a value, but I value health. It's a value. Right? Okay, so
that plays into the roles of being a mother, a wife.
So we switch roles to priorities, but it's similar. They come up with their priorities based on their roles. Okay, so I value my health. So my priority then is my what? Well, what is it then? Okay, I value my health, and what? I'm going to stay hydrated. Right. Simple. There you go. Okay, so then what's my goal? My goal is my how. Well, I'm going to fill up my water bottle and drink 60 ounces of water a day, and then what's my habit?
As long as it's a Stanley.
No, I don't. Actually, I don't do Stanley. I go against the grain.
I'm so glad you don't.
I don't. I have an old school, it's called a Hydro Flask. It holds 60 ounces of water. I think I've been carrying the same one for 6 or 7 years now. And except I lost it overseas, and my everything girl, Kelly, got me a new one. But that
was... Like this trip you just took, lost it?
No, it was one before that, and Kelly got me a new one. But, so, same thing. I believe when you identify what's most important to you, it's very easy to go, okay, well, I value family. So what's my priority? Spending time with them. Okay, what would my goal be? To have a brunch once a month with our kids. Okay, how do I make a habit of that? Well, I put it on my calendar at the beginning of every year. And so once you do that, it's like you can just go through those things. Not any woman, every woman and every man have things they would like to change.
Sure.
Change is scary, and it's also a very vague concept. It's like capturing smoke with your hands. Like, how do you change? But you can, and it's not hard.
Right.
when you take the time.
If you'll choose to grow, change will come.
Yeah.
I mean, you can change and not necessarily grow.
Okay. Okay. So I know you like neuroscience too, but I love everything that is happening in the world of neuroscience with neuroplasticity and all that they are able to prove now, because technology is in a place that they're just able to find out so much information, and I love it. So what do you think about the science that is coming out now about like psychocybernetics, like the brain steering, the visualization? Okay.
It's not new.
It's not new. It has been around forever. But you know what? Before it was kind of woo-woo. It was weird. Like, oh, if you say something, you mean your mind is going to believe it? Yeah. And now, like, all the science backs it. I'm, like, geeked out so much right now. It's flooding. It's flooding our culture now.
Yeah.
If you say your brain believes it. If you see it, your brain believes it.
Right.
You know, why are we afraid of scary movies when we know they're fake? Because our brain cannot differentiate between a real and an imagined image. Right. I mean, boom. The fact that we're now talking about that in regular conversations is I just think that's going to be a big culture shift. I really do.
Well, part of the answer to that question is how dangerous that is, because it's really, your life will adjust to the narrative it believes.
Yes.
But that takes time. And people think they can rewire their narrative in a 6-month workshop.
Sure.
Or a 1-year period. So I'll go back to the class I was teaching of these juniors.
Okay.
So 1992, is that right? 1992, October 20th, 1992. I've just finished reading 7 Habits. I'd just gotten a new job. First real career move. And this elderly gentleman who had been assigned to me as my coach and mentor for this job gave me this book. Well, actually, he gave me a box. And the box was a Franklin Covey planner. And in the box were all of Stephen Covey's writings. So, you know, he wrote all this stuff in the 80s. So by this time, it's a decade old, maybe something like that. And I'm thinking, okay, I'm 22 years old. I'll read the book. I'll do whatever I have to do. So part of Covey's teaching is begin with the end in mind.
Sure.
And so he challenges you to write your story. So I took it seriously, and I sat down with a yellow legal pad and wrote my story. So when people hear me say I keep these categories of faith, family, fitness, finances, and friendships.
Yeah, the F words.
Those all come out of that writing. To go, okay, what are the categories I'm going to use? And then I took a ink pen, because we didn't have computers at our homes back in the early 90s. And I wrote a very long document of my story, and wrote it in, you know, as you read it, it reads, Patrick has done this.
Is it still in the front of your briefcase?
Oh, yeah. Carried my briefcase everywhere. It's in my briefcase in my car right now. And so when I'm sitting with these juniors, I said, let me tell you something. Everything written on these 2 yellow sheets of paper has happened. Now, think about that. I was 22 when I wrote that. And I said, you will never become what you hope and dream for unless you describe it.
Sure.
Because your brain does not have a new narrative. The narrative is being dictated to it. So, you know, the reason people are so skeptical about how powerful your narrative is because it's been taken hostage.
Oh, absolutely.
By sales organizations.
And Saturday Night Live.
Yeah. And so when you know, you're great and I'm great, and so we're all great. But, you know, salespeople, the network marketing people have used it to say, visualize yourself in the Corvette and you'll have the Corvette. That's so shallow. Will you take the time to write your story, choose to believe in that story? And it doesn't mean it doesn't get edited along the way, because if you take the road less traveled where the potholes are, by the way, it's never well paved, then you go, okay, wait a minute, something's changing in me, and but it usually occurs within a well thought out story, because what happens when you do take the time to write your story is you'll actually sit there and go, maybe I don't want that. Maybe being living in a 6,000 square foot home is a little shallow. Maybe I should say something better than that about my life. So there's, and then there's melanating that takes place when you begin to, in your brain. So the answer to that question is it's exciting to me, but it's old to me because as a 22-year-old, something happened in me to go, wait a minute, I think I can write this story. And you would be able to associate with this because for me to choose to write my story was to rewrite a script that had been handed to me from lineage, right? From family, and so if you take what you think is going to be handed to you and go, wait a minute, I don't want to play with that ball. I want to play a different game. Then you have to write that story. And when people are in their 40s and 50s and you're talking to them and you're saying, this is going to be a journey, that goes back to what we said earlier, then this is the long game of rewriting this story. And it becomes even harder when they're older because to get them to say, to get them to take a couple of days of vacation and say, go write your story.
Yeah.
Then they're afraid of it.
I do encourage that.
I mean, they have to.
Yeah.
And it's
like you have to get away. You have to get away and you have to give yourself some silence and some solitude because you're not going to be able to do it. And women giving themselves permission to, she might kill me, but I'm gonna say she won't kill me, but she may not love it, but it's okay. I love her. She's like a kid to me. So Sheridan Mayo, Sheridan Moore, Sheridan Moore. Just kind of walked through just her growing and her growth, and she desires it. And so I sent her the framework, and I said, you have to leave. And so she told her mom, she told her dad, she told her husband, hey, y'all have to take care of the kids. And so it was hard. She had to leave town. She just went to Lubbock.
Yeah. And
she took the time out to sit down and work through it. But the hardest thing wasn't the framework or the deciding to make the plan or whatever you want to call it. It was taking the time to leave because we feel guilty, not just women, by the way.
Oh,
men.
No doubt.
Men and women feel guilty going, well, wait, isn't that a little, self-indulgent? I'm just going to take a couple days away to think. Yeah, it's called a reset. And if I let my crazy go too long, which I kind of have, I'm at that point right now where I've let my crazy go a little bit too long, and I don't take time away to go reset and go, okay, what am I doing? Why am I doing it? How did I get here? When did I lose focus? Like, if we don't do that, there's no way to write a narrative. It's impossible. It's impossible.
Well, and you're deep down inside, you're afraid that you're going to confront the reality that you're going to have to make some adjustments.
Yeah.
And you kind of subconsciously know, if I go away and really do this, then I'm going to leave this time knowing there's going to have to be some changes. And so your deep subconscious presses against that because it already knows, oh, no, you're doing this thing to me again.
Stephen Pressfield, The War of Art.
Yeah.
He talks about that.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's and I'm not going to remember the word he uses, but it's anytime we are going to do something that is going to benefit us or grow us that may have a little bit of difficulty, we're gonna experience that pushback. There's a word for that, pushback. That it's a very normal word. Somehow but it happens automatically.
Yeah, it's just resistance.
Yeah, that would be the word. So he does 2 whole chapters in The War of Art on resistance, and it's the moment you feel that little hint of resistance, that prickle on the back of your neck, whatever your resistance looks like, and you're like, I don't want to do this. That means you should.
Right.
Make yourself do it.
But don't make yourself I'll stop mid-sentence. I don't know if Jerry Seinfeld was being interviewed by Tim Ferriss or Joe Rogan, but Jerry Seinfeld was talking about how he writes every day.
Yes.
Every single day. And his daughter says to him one day, I'm going to be a writer. And so I'm going to write every day for 3 hours. And he said, no, you're not. She's like, Dad, what do you, and I may have the time wrong, but not at the end. She goes, Dad, I want to be a writer and I've learned from you. And he goes, no. He goes, I tell you what, every day commit to 15 minutes. To which she said, well, that's ridiculous, Dad. 15 minutes is not going to produce anything. He said, trust me, 15 minutes. And so she started the habit of 15 minutes until the habit became 20. and then it became 30.
Sure.
And then she was, because what we do is we go, I'm going to get in shape, I'm going to run the marathon.
Yeah, set really high goals.
Yeah, and we
Sure.
have no idea how we're even going to get there.
Sure.
We don't even consider the value of just starting. We don't consider the value of one step. We think, well, if I don't own this right now, no, that's not how you do this.
Sure.
You do this methodically. For instance, when I was in graduate school, I already knew I had a bit of an ADD problem, and so studying was going to be hard, and it always had been. I got through school just out of sheer intellect, but not effort. But then I have this graduate school thing, and I'm like, how am I going to do this? I got to read all this. I got to do all this. I have a wife, 2 kids, another on the way. I'm working at Chili's as a waiter, and how am I going to do all this? So I set a timer next to me when I sat down to first start studying. And I'd been out of school for, 8, 9, 10 years. So I'm trying to get back in school. So I set a timer, and I sat still and read and studied for as long as I could until I felt what I call the fidget, where I had to get up, I had to move. It's if you've got this.
How long does your fidget last?
Well, that's what I'm getting to.
Okay.
So I don't know at that time. So I'm like, well, let me just set a timer. So I set a timer, and as soon as the minute I felt, oh, I got to go.
Sure.
I hit the timer, and I got up, and I took about a 20, 30-minute break, and then I sat back down and did it again. And it turned out, when I looked at my timer after this season of studying, it was about an hour and 15 minutes.
Ultradian rhythms.
And so I went, okay, hour and 15. I'll make that my study time. So my study time was 9 p.m. to 2 a.m. every day, because the kids were in bed, and I could go till 2 a.m., and then I could get up at 6 and start the next day. And hour and 15. Now, where that ties into the conversation of just starting
Sure.
was now I can usually sit for a good 2.5 to 3 hours on focused effort. But if you'd have told me that 25 years ago,
Sure.
26 years ago, I'd have said, there's no way I'll ever sit for 2.5 or 3 hours. But it also goes back to how long it takes to reprogram your brokenness and fallenness into wellness and wholeness. And it gets better, and it gets better, and it gets better. The miraculous usually takes decades, not 30 seconds.
So I told a child, I won't say which one, because they don't like when I talk about them on
Fair.
anything. So just a child was in a relationship and was just very frustrated at the lack of growth. And I said, Bud, let me just tell you something. If that person decides right now that they want to change everything, I can tell you when and where I was when I decided, I don't want to live like this anymore. I want to be a different human. That person makes that decision now. You won't see any major, long-lasting life differences for about 10 years. Now, you'll see changes, you'll see growth, but they have a decade before they're going to look like whatever you have in your head,
Right.
which is not okay for them to have to pursue anyway. But my point is, not to discourage people, because I don't want to discourage anybody, because you will see change.
Yeah.
And then it builds up. It's that compound. It's the habits. It's habit stacking. It's character stacking. Same thing. Those little changes you make begin, and then you look back and you go, wow.
There's a house.
There's a house. So some friends had a piece of art delivered, and this is a horrible story, and I shouldn't even tell it, but it's the first thing that popped in my head, and so this was just 2 days before I left the country, so 3.5 weeks ago. They had a very, very expensive piece of art that we had been waiting months to get delivered. So they're clients. I mean, it was in my design role. So this truck delivers this giant crate. Now, granted, the crate is 7 feet long and 4 feet high, and it's a wooden crate, and in it is this triptych,
Yes.
3 pieces of art. And so it was supposed to be white glove, which means they take it apart, they bring it in the house, but no, they were just going to leave this big old crate on the driveway. And I was like, no, you're not. And so I'm trying to be kind. And I'm like, no, I really need you to deliver this. Well, that's not what our paper says. It says here, and they showed me, it said economy delivery. And I'm like, well, no. I know they paid for white glove. So then they're like, well, we're going to take it back. I'm like, no, you're not. We've been waiting months. And so we get the owner on the phone. He finally agrees to bring it into the garage. Okay. Then they want me to sign for it without opening it. I was like, I'm not signing this. And the owner goes, then ma'am, get out of the way so we can take it. So I stand. This is horrible. This is horrible. There's these two moving, people. I stand in front of the crate with my legs spread and my hands on the hips. And I'm like, over my dead body, you will not take this. And they don't know what to do. And I was like, what do we have to do to get this thing open? They're like, we don't even have tools. I was like, well, I have a crowbar and a hammer in my car. I will go get it. So we finally get it open. And one of them says something to me. And I lean over and I said, there is a plate and 8 screws in my right ring finger from where I broke a man's jaw. And you're lucky Jesus got a hold of me 20 years ago. And I told the clients later, I said, I'm mortified that I said it. But 20 years ago, who knows? I probably would have punched him.
Right.
But it's taken 20 years. I still had that little niggling like, I'm about to punch somebody up in here. Maybe 25 years. Let's give myself some credit. Maybe 25 years. But it's taken a long time.
Yeah.
A long time for me to become the me I want to be, and I'm not done.
Yeah.
But it's not an overnight thing. It's just not.
No, it's not.
There are still times I do stuff and think, did I just say that? Did I just do that?
Probably on a daily basis.
Probably on a daily basis.
But I've literally stopped and watched people build houses because, and I would encourage people to do this because when you watch bricklayers, if you see something huge that's actually been done brick by brick, how does a bricklayer even have the mentality to go, oh my goodness, do you see how big this thing is going to be when we're finished? But it's still brick by brick by brick by, any way you cut it, it's still brick by brick.
There's no machine doing it.
There's nothing. And then by the end, you're like, wow, that took a while. But look at that now. And life is not a tilt wall building. It is a brick by brick construction. And nor is it a 3D printed life. It's a brick by brick by brick thing. And sometimes you are making the brick before you can even put the brick in the house.
Oh, yeah.
And you have to work on that brick. And you're like, okay, wait a minute. Before I settle that one in and cement that one in. And then sometimes you have to go back and you step back from your house and you go, that brick isn't right. Now I got to go through the whole process of releasing the mortar around that brick and replacing that brick. It is just, and this could be disappointing, but the reality is, you finish wall by wall of the house of your life, and it's not done until you breathe your last.
Yeah.
And that's the last brick.
But that doesn't mean you can't thoroughly enjoy the new life you are building.
Right, totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
And that's why I said I don't want to
step back from it and look at it at the end of the day and go, good wall today.
Yeah.
Good wall today.
Yeah, I didn't, 25.
Really? Or you go, bad wall today. Didn't do very good today. That wasn't very good today.
Bad brick today.
That was bad today. Didn't do very well. And you adjust and you go to bed and you get up and you adjust. You made a statement probably 20 minutes ago about how what we say and what we do, you have no idea the effect of that. What teachers, go back to elementary, junior high, and high school or college, what teachers said things to you or did things that changed the trajectory of your life?
So when I wrote my first book, which was my story, which was hard, which, by the way, when you decide to process trauma, it makes you sick.
Yeah.
So as you're writing your narrative, if you are someone who has been through some things and you decide to truly write your story, just know that it can take a physical toll on you.
Absolutely.
So,
might need to get a counselor.
Keep that in mind. Yeah. So when I wrote my first book, I wrote that the first thing I remember from a teacher was going to school, and I was probably, kindergarten, first grade. And I had a teacher take me out into the hallway because my dad traveled. He was an overachiever, workaholic, won't surprise you. But my mom had a lot of mental illness. And so when she was great mom, she was great mom. I had the ballet bun and the, the little outfit to match. But when she was not a good mom, we weren't even clean when we went to school. We weren't clean. And so I had a teacher pull me out to the hall. And I remember she smelled like roses. I don't know how I know that, but she did. And she had the prettiest hair. And I remember her rubbing her hand on the side of my cheek. and her telling me how pretty of a little girl I would be if I would take a bath every day. Okay, so imagine hearing this in kindergarten or first grade.
From a lady wearing white shoulders.
But she was so kind about it. It wasn't mean. I remember the way she made me feel, and so then I figured out how to start bathing myself when my dad was gone. Just did. And so for whatever reason, the way she approached it just stuck with me, that you can have hard conversations with people, even little people, and do it well, right? And so that was my first, as a teacher. And then in high school, randomly, and I didn't start writing until really just a few years ago, probably 4 or 5 years ago. I like to teach, but it was just taking notes and regurgitate. But putting it all together is very new. But I had a teacher in high school, I think it was like 10th or 11th grade, and her name was Evil Eye Everton. Because when she leaned over the projector, the light shined up on her face, and where her glasses were, it made like these eye lines.
So is that her name, or is that what you called her?
That's what we called her.
You just called her Evil Eye? Is that what you said?
Evil Eye Everton. It was Mrs. Everton, but she had she always had this weird scowl because she did everything by this projector, but she told me I was a very gifted writer, and I tucked it away. I never brought it back out. When I first felt compelled to write, I was like, no, I'm not writing this book. I have spent 20 years becoming a different human, the human I would like to be, so that people don't have to know the ugly story. Why the heck would I write a whole book about the ugliness?
Right.
Obviously 4 or 5 years later, I know why it needed to get out there, and I'm glad. But somebody planted a seed that I didn't even know was growing, but I remembered it later. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
So there's ways to plant seeds. I just want people to obey me, Patrick. I'm just like, if you would just do what I said, then none of these mistakes would happen, right? Because, clearly I know what I'm doing, and that does not work.
Right.
I know it doesn't work. People don't want to be told what to do. They want to be encouraged.
Right.
Or inspired.
And you're spending, Paul says, some planted, some watered.
Yeah.
Some reaped.
Yeah.
So are you a planter? Sometimes. Are you a waterer? Sometimes. Are you to reap? Sometimes.
Very
Rarely.
occasionally, yeah.
But most of the time, all you're doing is casting.
Yeah.
All you're doing is just throwing it out there to see if, and that's why I ask about who are the people, because when you start realizing, when you pause and go, who are the people who probably didn't realize what they were saying to me or doing to me that changed me, then that puts in perspective again, then what am I doing today? What am I saying today that is possibly going to be life-altering, in someone's life? We've joked before, people heard me preach about this, about how much I just can't stand being at airports. We ran into each other at the airport.
He was rude to me, by the way. He pretended he did not see me.
And
I'm kidding.
Yeah, I was like, where did that happen? So I always think, okay, here we are. Every time I travel, just about every time I travel now, something's going to happen, that a flight's going to be delayed or something like that. It's just the nature of it now. Going in, this is probably not going to work out. But I've learned, and you can call it a bit of a trick, but you realize you can make someone's day and they will make yours. These poor men and women who have to sit there behind those counters and listen to you because your life just got altered because of your flight. It's just crazy, because I can walk up and say, hey, I know you've been going, I'll literally say it this way. I know this is hell. I see the line. So tell me what you need me to do to help you with what you're doing, and we'll be good. And you'd be surprised how many of them, and I mean that, because I don't have any control over this.
Sure.
I'm not going to change this. So what can I do to help you? Tell me where to go, what to do, and, because I'll do whatever I need to do.
It's a circle of concern and influence.
And then it just is Covey. And it just, how can I help you? And just, because I know you're doing your best and you're getting yelled at and everybody thinks you have control over all the planes in the air. And it's amazing how many times, if you get to a place where you're not trying to manipulate the situation, because people will be able to read that.
Yeah.
But they'll be like, you really care that I'm.
And you're not trying to get me to bump up your flight.
I'm not trying to get you to do anything. And even if you're a Southwest flyer like I am all the time, I laugh all the time. I'm always in the A group because I'm flown so much, because I'm A-list and all this kind of stuff. And it's funny because if you get in line to get on the plane. Everybody wants to get in the first 7 rows. They just all want to get in the first 7 or 8 rows. And I joke with every one of the flight attendants because they're usually standing there staring at people. And I'm like, everybody thinks there's only 7 rows in this plane, don't they? And yesterday the lady says to me, she goes, my goodness, she goes, I think there's a golden ticket under one of these seats. And she goes, I've been doing this for 20 years and I've never found that golden ticket. So by the time I get to my row, which is usually 15 or 16, how nice they are to me through the flight. It's just all of just how you speak into people's lives.
You said something profound that I had not thought about, and I'm probably going to write it down just because I like to keep little nuggets. But you said, because my life was altered, I've never thought about it. We want to act like we're being put out or we're being affected or we're being harmed or like something bad just happened to us when really, sorry about that, our life was just altered.
Yeah.
It was just altered. Like my life was just altered. It's not bad or good.
It's the nature of living in the river of life.
My life was just altered.
I mean, that's the whole premise.
That's a mind shift for me.
Well, it's the whole premise of, I told you this book we're working on, which is In Search of the Radical Middle. Part of the premise, the visual image of that book is, I want to live life in the river. And it's a flowing river. Sometimes it's a calm river. Sometimes it's a rapids river. But I want to live in the middle. I don't want to live on the shores.
Yeah.
I don't want to find a shore that's comfortable to me and go, I'm going to stop on this shore. I want to see where this river goes. Most people stake out their comfort on one shore or the other. And then they look at people on one shore and go, why'd you do that? And they look at people on one shore and go, why'd you do that? And oftentimes it seems just easier and more comfortable to just get out of the boat and go over to a shore. But in the middle of this thing, you can't see the rocks. You can't see the whirlpools. But things might alter. Things might change. But I want to stay in that middle. I don't want to be prisoner to the shores. The shores are, you can run into them and you can get beached, and then you're no longer in the journey. And people get so comfortable in an extreme for protection. Whether it's a right extreme or a left extreme, they run to the extremes because they think that seems like the safe place to park their opinions and their identity. I don't want to do that. I want to stay in the rough. I want to stay in the wild. I want to stay on the road less traveled. I want to stay where I'm getting buffeted about, I'm getting moved about, but at the same time, I'm passing people who have left the journey and decided to camp out on the shore, which means some of the things I believe, some of the things I have believed, they're going to get challenged because I'm going to go down a different river that, I don't think I ever thought about this. And, I've used the phrase, I believe a whole lot less now than I used to believe, but the few things I hold on to, I believe with all my heart. And, you kind of go, okay, that was extreme. That was kind of stupid. I'm not sure why I said that. And you just stay in the river. Occasionally it's going to get calm. It'll be fine. But occasionally you're going to be sitting at LaGuardia and it's going to get all screwed up. And you're going to go, okay, I can get on the shore of anger and start shouting at people. Or I can go, okay, let's see what this ride's like. Let's see what happens. And it's just, I'll tell you one other story and then ask you another question. I was in Arkansas. I didn't know why, except that some people had asked me for a meeting. And so I go up to Arkansas. And they're touring me around. It's a church, so they're touring me around all their buildings and everything else. And they're thinking it's going to be a good thing to have a conversation with me because of my past. And I was like, this isn't going to be good. And so we're walking around, and this gentleman who's in his 60s, maybe close to 70, steps out of a room. And the guy that's giving me the tour, he says, hey, Patrick, meet this guy. His name is Jonathan Beasley. And I go, Beasley? He goes, yeah, Jonathan Beasley. And I go, your dad wouldn't happen to be Manly Beasley, would he? And he goes, yeah, that's my dad. I lose it and start weeping, lose it. And I can't control myself. And they're both staring at me like, okay, what's happening here? Did my dad hurt you? Nobody knows what's going on. And I said, when I was in junior high, your dad would come speak at our church. And I said, and he was a prophet. There's no doubt about it. And something in my little junior high brain kept saying, listen to this man. Listen to this man. And I said, and I did. I said, I can take you back to notes. And then I said, then I got on his cassette tape club. And I listened to him all through college. And I said, I remember the last time I heard him speak, and we talked about this place where he spoke and how I was there. And I was like, oh my goodness, this guy. I said, your dad changed my life. And I said, and I never met him. And I said, so I get a chance to meet you. And he was like, you got to be kidding me.
That's crazy.
But the reason I tell that story is because I was in 7th grade. And here's this man, And then the funny thing, he tells me, he goes, my dad, and I knew his dad had passed away. And I thought he passed away at this ripe old age of 80. And I go, how old was your dad when he passed? He goes, he's 56. Oh. So as young as that guy was, and then you start going, okay, what have I said? What 8th grader is holding on to what I said? Which is why Cindy and I did the seniors at our house, because that's when we realized, that's sort of critical. So anyways, it matters what you say, and it matters where you say it and how you say it. And
it matters who you say it to and your role to that person. Andy Stanley was talking about that. Who you are to someone carries weight.
Totally.
And so you need to be really careful what you say to people as far as your relationship goes with them, because you
never know who you are to these people. I remember when I ran for office and you told me, you said, the one thing you're going to have to be aware of is how arrogant you are. I was like, my God, Brandy, that's a pot calling the kettle black.
Well, I know. That's why I can do it.
And so what's funny is I forget how many people, this is going to come across as arrogant, I forget how many people know me that I don't know. And so it matters when we mention Southwest for their free advertising.
But I don't believe you're arrogant. You come off as
right.
arrogant.
And that's so now I've had to be careful, even when I get on a plane, because you can tell, the look.
Yes.
The look you get where like
stank face.
Yeah. And I'm like, that I'll just smile. I'll just smile. And if I need to stop and shake a hand, I'll stop and shake a hand. And it's not that you're trying to avoid the conversation, but to your point, there's a perception of who you are to them, and you don't know who you are to them.
Absolutely.
And so you have to go, okay, well, what? And some people may say, let's go back to how we started this conversation. People are like, well, some people may not like me, and that's just fine. Well, but the balance to that is, in neutral arenas, you don't have any control of that.
Sure.
So what you have to do, you can't just settle back and go, like I did in my 20s and early 30s, and go, I don't care what you think about me. I'm just going to scowl, and I'm just going to be a jerk. Just like me or love me, hate me or whatever.
Sure.
You can't do that.
Yeah.
Because it's, to go to the phrase, it's not neutral.
You can't let it ruffle your feathers. Okay, so obviously, given the fact that I mentioned that, I have a plate in my finger from when I was, I think, 20. I think it's when at 21, 20. I was 20 when I got this plate in my finger. So, that was a long time ago. And I don't want to be that person anymore. I don't. There's something else you said to me one time you probably don't remember. You were like, Brandy Bell, you show up to the saloon kicking into the doors and you got your gun drawn before you even know if there's a fight. And I tell people that story all the time because I'm like, I don't want to be that.
Right.
I don't. And when you come from a traumatic childhood, you tend to pull your guns too fast, right? You tend to throw punches.
Protection.
It's protection.
Right.
You tend to stand in front of a crate of art with your hands on your hips like you can really stop people because, right? It's protection. So I don't want to be like that. I want to recognize, okay, so I've really been into Marcus Aurelius, which will not, surprise you at all. I love Stoics. I love Stoic people. Yeah. Bruce Lee was a Stoic. Bruce Lee tells you to be like the river. Be like a river. Just, sometimes you're going to have to push over things a little bit harder. Sometimes you just have to ease over things, but the river just flows and it just moves. So I love the entire metaphor.
Have you read Seneca?
Okay, so yes. Well, no. Yes and no. So I've listened, but I haven't read it. I love Seneca. I quote him all the time. I have bits and pieces. And Marcus Aurelius. I want to be a little more stoic in life. I don't want to be extreme. I want to find myself a little more down the middle. And where I'm going with that is we find ourselves, it seems, in a society and in a culture where people kind of get mad at you if you're not picking a side.
It's the extremes.
I'm not going to pick a side. I'm going to be a possibilitarian. So when people are like, "Whoa, are you a Democrat, Republican, liberal, conservative?" I'm a possibilitarian. I just want to believe that there's hope on either side and there's hope in the middle. You're fighting for the radical middle. You realize the middle is where the radical is. Well, the middle feels the fanatic better. Is on the extremes. Yeah, that doesn't feel good to me. Right. And I don't want to be the girl on the I don't want to be someone who is not in the arena. I think, to me, Again, going back to also, sometimes when you're writing a book, you can't help but talk about it. So I'm not just trying to shamelessly plug it. It's just I've been working for years on this thing. And I end it, and my challenge to people is going back to Teddy Roosevelt's
I was just getting ready
quote,
to say that. The man in the fight.
Just
or the woman.
Or the woman. Be the person in the arena. And that means you're not on either side of the river, throwing bottles or holding up signs or smack talking from your computer. It means you're in the water. You're doing the hard things, and you don't care what the people on the shore think of you. I like being there. And it doesn't mean I'm trying to intentionally be offensive or rude, or because, I'm married to Mr. Rogers, quite literally.
Yeah,
and I love it.
That's a good
He is so good. He is good, and he is kind, and he comes from a very solid, healthy background and upbringing. And so he doesn't kick down saloon doors. He is a stoic by nature.
You're married to the female version of Cindy. I mean, the male version of Cindy.
So 100%.
Totally.
100%. And he is in the river. And he never thought, I'm going to get in the river. He's just always been in the river.
I'm glad you've already co-opted this analogy.
I love it. Yeah. But then you're going to trademark that shit. You're going to trademark it, and I'm not going to be able to use it anymore.
I'm going to trademark possibilitarian.
No.
That's a good word. I like that word.
I'm sure I heard it. Nothing new under the sun. I don't know where I heard it, but I don't think I can. I'm sure I heard it somewhere.
What people are going to do with this conversation is say, then you guys are telling us you don't have convictions.
Oh, no, there are things I will fight for.
Wrong. And that's why I say, many of you are fighting for too many things, which you cannot do.
Sure.
And I've just come to the place where I've said, I'm not going to fight over that.
Yeah.
I'm just not going to fight over that. And I'm not going to get into an argument with you over that. If you want to have a discussion where we can sit down and talk about it and respect each other and begin with love and end with love. I love the passage where the Apostle Paul says in 1 Corinthians 13, because everybody reads 1 Corinthians 13. I want to say this, and then I want to ask you what you're up to and wrap this thing up.
Sure.
In 1 Corinthians 13, everybody wants to read those words. Love is patient, love is kind, love is gentle, all these sweet things. Because we're going to read it at a wedding, and say, love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things. Love never fails. And then we stop. Actually, the more important part of that passage is right after that. Because that's when the Apostle Paul says, now let me tell you something. Everything we know and see, we see and know in part. And then he says, we actually just barely see through a glass, dimly. In other words, it's blurred. Everything is blurred. That's when he says, after that, he goes, so now faith abides, hope abides, love abides, these three. But the greatest of these is love. So again, we always read the first part. We barely read the second part. The second part is the power, because he says, we just don't know what we think we know.
Yeah.
He says our vision is blurred at best. And then when he says, think about this, faith, real deal. It's real. It abides. The dude abides, right? But most people probably don't know what that's from. Hope abides. So faith and hope, critical. Everybody says faith matters. And then he goes, and love. But then what does he say? The greatest of these is love. So if you think about, wait a minute, you mean he's saying love is more important than faith and love is more important than hope? Well, actually he is, because the way you love either reinforces or deconstructs the faith and hope you confess. And love is comfortable with just not knowing. And because I don't know, it means I have to say, you know what, I'm just going to be patient and kind and gentle and meek rather than shouting, because I don't know. We don't know. We just don't know. And at best, I have to confess, it's blurry. It's I can squint all I want, but at best, it's blurry. And so that's why I want to stay in the river, because I don't get to see. And all of you people on the shores are convinced. You're absolutely convinced. You're locked in, and yet this river's still going. And so there's so much power in going, I have convictions. I absolutely do. But it's not it's not a full book of
No.
92
And
confessions.
it's getting smaller and smaller as I get older. You know, and I actually mentioned that in the end. I'm like, look, that doesn't mean that there are not things I will fight for. There are absolutely things I will fight for, but it doesn't mean I have to fight for everything.
And there are very few things I'll fight for. The older I get, it becomes people I'll fight for.
Well, there you go. And that's pretty much, because I would say it would be single moms. It would be young girls who have not been given opportunity because they come from broken families. It would be young entrepreneurs and old entrepreneurs who may not have resources. Like, I am willing to fight for those people, but there are very few ideas that that I'm going to fight for anymore, because they just change. They just change, and I don't know everything. I'm sure I learned it from somewhere, but I want to go into the room assuming I know less than everybody.
Right.
Because then I'm going to learn something.
Yeah.
And that's hard for a know-it-all like me, okay? Because I'm a know-it-all, right? Like, I can probably talk somewhat intelligently on most conversations, on most topics in conversations, but I don't know it all. So quit acting like I know it all.
Right.
So just kind of going in and going, love is comfortable with not knowing.
Yeah.
I love that.
I like that. So, okay.
I'm going to steal it.
How does everybody find you?
All the platforms. So Bell and Co. Last name Bell. So Bell and Co. on Instagram, Facebook, Gmail. We obviously have a website for that. Keeping Good Company is really our heart right now, and it mirrors exactly what your wife is doing with every neighbor, except we're just filming the projects we've been working on for 20 years. We're just filming them, hopefully to inspire people. And next season, it's going to be very kid-centric. We want to work with the next generation on how can we do fun things. This year we redid our CPS building that had not been done. And we waited. It was hard. Like, we had to be very patient, but we completely redid the CPS building, and now, people from Ector County are bringing their kids over because they have kids that can't go to that CPS building because it overwhelms them, and these kids have already dealt with trauma, and they now have a safe, calming space to go. And so we're doing really good work with Keeping Good Company. Also, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube.
Your first book?
First book was Destined for More. It's on Amazon. Just Google Brandy Bell Books. The second book is the Itty Bitty Book of Great Big Joy. And there's another one coming out, Itty Bitty Book of Great Big Kindness. And then the third book is Just Traveling Through. And that will still probably be 18 months out because we are just now in the process.
So the first three books are on Amazon?
First two are on Amazon.
Okay.
Third one is coming out.
In the making?
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
good. And then the fourth one is the magnum opus.
No, well, I don't know. There might be a couple magnum opuses. One day, you're going to listen to me because you haven't yet. You're going to sit down and we're going to get out called Design Gifted. Design called and Gifted.
So
See, I can't even say it. Well, I can't say it anymore. I stopped saying it. So now I've screwed up the order, but I'm worried about getting sued all the time.
Any last words or questions?
No, I'm glad. I'm glad you're doing this.
Yeah, me too.
It's good when you have teachers that you learn under to be able to continue to learn under them. Some of my favorite teachers don't do anything anymore. They're dead or they're retired, and so I just keep reading over their old material. So it's good to have a few teachers that are hanging in there and podcasts.
Well, we're teaching with others, and had the great joy of being in New York and being with an organization that was founded by Tim Keller 25 years ago.
Wow.
And one of the great things I learned, for those of you aspiring writers and yourself as well, is I don't think he wrote his first book till he was 54 or 55. And then he became just prolific, which is the testimony or testament of it doesn't matter how old you are.
Yeah.
Just go. You didn't achieve your greatest achievement when you were in your 30s.
Yeah.
And we live in a community like Midland, Texas, that's filled with successful 30-somethings. Who
a lot
think
of
this
them.
is it. You're like, hang on, bro, sis, whatever. There's a lot ahead here. This is not the pinnacle. So Midland's an interesting place. But
it is. It's a whole city full of overachievers.
Yeah, it's an interesting world of engineers and geologists and entrepreneurs. And
a lot of entrepreneurs.
Yeah, a lot. So fantastic visiting with you and seeing you again.
I miss you.
I know you'll be behind now, so you got to catch up with your day. But thanks for your time and your friendship.